All right, guys and girls, this is my recap of the R. Kelly trial, day 2. The court began with the judge coming out. Well, first, R. Kelly and his attorneys were in the courtroom. You could clearly see R. Kelly. There's a camera pointing directly at him. And R. Kelly looks like R. Kelly. I don't know who the jailhouse barber is, his beard, his haircut were definitely on point. He wore a blue suit with a button-up shirt up under it that looked like it had a hint of lavender in it, and a blue tie. He also wore glasses with a black frame. When the judge came out, she stated that they've been working with epidemiologists about having the trial during the pandemic, and while everyone in the courtroom was vaccinated, she still wanted everyone to wear their mask when they weren't speaking. Now, no one is allowed in the courtroom other than the jurors, the attorneys, the witness, and R. Kelly, and the courtroom staff, of course. So trial opened up with the government's first witness, who was Jherhonda Pace, who was formerly Jherhonda Johnson. She's married now. She was the government's first witness on yesterday, and she was still on the stand today. So she started by talking about some of their sexual encounters. She said that when they would have sex, R. Kelly would like for her to put her hair into pigtails and dress like a Girl Scout. She also talked about she had Rob tattooed on her chest, like somewhere in this area, but she has since gotten it covered up with a black rose. And she first went to Rob's house with her friend Kiana, and they went for a party. They took the train. The train ride was 2 hours, and they had to walk, I think, about 10 minutes, and that was each way. And they only stayed at the party 30 minutes because the music was too loud. Now, next, R. Kelly's attorney was able to question him. I want to say his name was Mr. Cannon, but I'm probably saying it wrong. It may be a little bit different, but he did an amazing job. He was a black man, older, did a good job. So through cross, he brought out that Ms. Pace is alleging that their relationship occurred from May 2009 through January of 2010. And I use the word relationship lightly because she was a minor, and a minor cannot engage in a relationship, especially a sexual relationship, with an adult. That's not legal. And she also stated that her and Rob, which that's what she called him, they broke up when Rob spit on her, slapped her, and she had to wipe semen off of her face with her t-shirt. She also remembered Rob's telephone number from 10 years ago, but she did not remember her own phone number. She also had Rob's contact information saved in her phone, and I'm saying Rob because that's what she called him. She had his contact information saved in his phone, and she had a picture of him under contact. Through cross-examination, the lawyer was able to bring out that this was not a picture that Rob sent her. This was a picture that she got off the internet and saved on with his contact information. They also talked about the lawsuits that she filed against him. And let me back up. I'm not talking in chronological order because the testimony was not in chronological order. But they also talked about the lawsuits that were filed. The first situation occurred shortly after their breakup, and then the next one, she hired the next lawyer a few months later, and then the next lawyer a few years later. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So after the first lawsuit was settled in February of 2010, and they had been broken up a month, so she was still 16 at the time. She basically settled I'm just go ahead and give it. She settled the first lawsuit for $1.5 million, and she said that she settled the lawsuit. Basically, they settled because Rob wanted to buy her silence. On cross-examination, Rob's lawyer handed her the settlement agreement and said, "Show me where it says that he's settling to buy your silence." And of course, it wasn't in there. The settlement agreement said that he was settling because he wanted to avoid the cost of litigation. After that lawsuit, a few months later, she hired another lawyer, and then she hired another lawyer, I believe years after that. She signed her first settlement agreement against him when she was 16. She signed her second settlement agreement when she was 20. Also, the settlement agreement when she was 16, she stated that she didn't see it before she signed it, but she and her mom both signed it, and it reminded me of the law firm in the Finding our Escaping R. Kelly, whatever it is, documentary that was on Lifetime. They talked about this law firm in Chicago that was basically a mill for people to go to R. Kelly to get settlement checks from. So I don't know if that's the same lawyer or not, but either way, they settled the first one for 1.5 million. I don't know what the second amount was, but I do know that per her testimony, she is paying him back for one of the settlements. Let's see. She also talked about her interviews from Instagram, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. She said she didn't get paid, but she did write her book. She could not recall how much she made from the book. She said it was more than $25,000, but less than $100,000. And she said it was from Amazon, and that she self-published the book. And I think her breaking her confidentiality clause with the settlement agreement is why she's having to pay back one of the settlements. She said that she first went to his house in May of 2009 and for the party, and on the second time that she went there, they had sex or some type of sex. So she went there, she had on, and she was in the pool area, she had on her swimsuit, and he had her walk back and forth while she took her bathing suit off. He performed oral sex on her, according to her, and from there, she had gotten her bag and they went to a room, and she told him, "I'm not 19, I'm actually 16, and showed him her ID. He then told her, "You continue to say you're 19 and act like you're 21. On cross-examination, there was some issues about whether she told her previous attorneys, he said act 21 or 25. It really wasn't that material. Either way, there was also some issues about her age. They really weren't important. But they did bring out that during the first trial, when she went to see R. Kelly at the trial, she was only 14. She was a freshman in high school, and she was a self-proclaimed super fan. She lied to the court officers and told them she was 18 versus 14, which was her true age. She didn't miss school every day during that time because they didn't have court every day, because sometimes they had hearings, but she was there for 3 months. Also, during part of her testimony, she said that R. Kelly had blown kisses at her during the first trial, but admitted that he didn't even know her back then. So part of the testimony was that she was promised a t-shirt and an autograph by R. Kelly or his staff from the first trial for being so supportive. There was testimony or issues about how did she get the autograph. She didn't get the t-shirt, but she did get the autograph. So there was testimony about her standing in front of the tour bus and refusing to move until she got her autograph. But she later admitted that she didn't stand in front of a tour bus. She stood in front of his car. Well, she waved his car down, not stood in front of it. She waved the car down until he would give her an autograph. And they asked her, what did she do with the autograph? She put it in her closet because it was on her friend Kiana's bank statement. And Kiana was with her at that time. And Kiana also went with her other times with R. Kelly. So from there, they also talked about an arrest. They tried to get into an arrest that she had. It was an arrest. It wasn't really relevant, and if so, it was even a juvenile arrest or conviction, so it wasn't really relevant. And February 17th of 2019, she had an interview with the government where she admitted that she told Robert that she was 19 and she was actually 16. She also after that, she said she went to the original law firm because she wanted to press criminal charges against Robert, but the law firm recommended that she did not press charges against Robert for whatever reason. I was really confused about that because you don't need to go to a law firm to press charges against someone. You just call the police. Now, there was a little bit of a Perry Mason moment, not too big of a moment. The lawyer ended up asking her, do you know what the truth is? So this was an issue about a time she came over to R. Kelly's house and they were hanging out. He gave her a drink. She said it tasted really good, but she didn't feel well afterwards. So he took her to what's called the mirror room to lay down, and then at some point she went downstairs to meet Robert. So the issue was whether or not Robert escorted her down to this room where he was, or if she just walked down to the room herself, because it came out that Robert was actually preparing for a party. So it was like, okay, are you lying? Because he said, and you said in another report, that he was preparing for a party. So how would he come leave his preparations to come walk you downstairs? Either way, not much of a big deal, but it was great courthouse dramatics. After that party, or after that night, she stayed the night and she did not leave until the next morning. She requested to be let out of or escorted out of the house. She left and was given $50 in the envelope and was told that it was from Robert. She also talked about a time that her and another friend went to Robert's house after they'd already met him and ran through his gate. So they go to his house, her friend was driving, and they just are sitting there and they're waiting for someone else to come through his gate so they can run through. They run through the gate and get caught by Bubba, who was someone on R. Kelly's staff member. And he's like, what are you guys doing here? And she says, oh, I'm looking for my heels that I left the other day. Now, she also admitted that she had no plans for when she got onto the property, but once she got onto the property and was encountered by Bubba, then she kind of was like, okay, I can just say my shoes are in the house. So she did receive a settlement, two settlements. The first one for $1.5 million. The second, we don't know how much it was, but she's paying one of the settlements back, and for some reason she paid Bubba $4,000. That was not elaborated on, so I don't know what that is about. Oh, sorry. All right. So after a few months after she signed the first settlement agreement, she hired another lawyer to sue Rob again. And then years later, she hired another lawyer. I don't know what those, how far those two suits went. I just know she received a second settlement. But one thing that came out in cross, which I thought was just horrible for the government, was that she admitted that she had wanted a relationship with Rob. Even after they broke up and he'd done things to her, she still wanted a relationship with him. So after the first settlement, she gave him some of the money back because she felt bad about what was happening. And she said between the first settlement and the second suit, she still wanted a relationship with him. And then from the second suit to the third suit, she still wanted a relationship with him. So it really went to like motive and her thought process about what was going on. She talked about being at his house, staying in a room, and there was a bathroom in the room, but she had to ask Robert for permission to go to the bathroom. She said that if she was on his good side, it would take 5 minutes to get approval to go to the bathroom, and once it took 3 days to get permission to use the bathroom. I don't know what happened in those 3 days. They didn't go that deep. So they talked about the day they broke up, and there was a lot of testimony about it and a lot of back and forth. So what was originally stated was he slapped her, he choked her out against the wall. She came to on the floor and he spat in her face. They then had sex, and she took the shirt she was wearing to wipe the semen and the spit off of her face, and she left. Something else came out later. Now, one thing that ended up coming out from that was, it was kind of shocking, like, okay, this man did this to you, but you still want a relationship with him. And then two, later it came out that she got out of the situation because there was some issue with some heels that he asked about or she had, and she told him they were at her uncle's house and she had to go get them. So part of it from the government was, okay, he wanted those heels because he liked for her to wear those heels when they had sex. But there was also testimony that he wanted her to wear heels for a party. So there was conflicting information, but she said that the heels were at her uncle's house and she had to go get them, and that was the last time that she saw him. But again, she testified that she still wanted a relationship with him after that, and even months and years after that, she still wanted a relationship with him. She said that when she got home to her house that day, she still had the shirt on that she'd used to wipe the spit off of her face and the semen, and she told her mom what happened. They did not call the police. They ultimately contacted the lawyers who filed the first suit against Robert for her, and I believe she may have given them the shirt, but there was no like DNA or anything done on the shirt. There wasn't even like any test to confirm that it was even her DNA on the shirt. So that was also a point for the cross-examination. She had several interviews with the government, and the defense attorney did a great job of bringing out the details. He also talked about how many times she met with the government to prepare for trial. I think it was several times, and on the most recent time, it was like up to 6 hours. She even, Miss Pace even knew several of the people on the prosecutor's staff by first name, so it really showed that they were really, really familiar with her. One thing that came up continuously or numerous times was she testified that Rob had never told her anything about him having herpes. Now, the defense attorney did a great job. He produced a report that the government gave based on an interview with her, saying that in 2019, they made this report where she said in July of 2009, Rob confided in her that there was this thing going around called herpes, and him, like, it was in his circle, and he wanted her to check down there to make sure she didn't have it. And he gave her some type of examination, like with his finger, to make sure that she didn't have it. So it was really conflicting because she testified numerous times that he had told her nothing about him having herpes. But here was this report from the government when she told the government that he had confided in her, telling her that he did have herpes and that he wanted to make sure that she didn't have it or to be careful. She on many of the questions from the prosecutor, she didn't recall or she wasn't sure. And even as a defense attorney, I always hate that because I'm like, oh, you recall everything for the questions that the government has, but you don't recall anything for what the questions that I have. All right, so again, she admitted that she still wanted, between the first and the second lawsuit, she wanted a relationship with him. And then between the second and third lawsuit, she still wanted a relationship with him. So there was another report where she gave conflicting information about going to Rob's house and getting accosted by security versus calling Bubba and telling Bubba she was there. She alleges that Bubba is a part of Rob's security team, so she was just kind of misspoken. But either way, it was just something that they brought up. So, and Bubba is also, I think his first name is Jermaine. His name is Jermaine Maxey or Maxey Jermaine. Either way, she met him via MySpace. There was some conflicting testimony about whether or not he invited her and her friend to this party at Rob's house or just her, and she was just conveniently with her friend. Not a big deal. After her and Rob broke up, there was some questioning about her saying that she drove by Rob's house 30 times and she was questioning whether or not he still lived there. She said she didn't recall that even after the attorney for Robert produced the report. She's like, I don't recall that. I don't remember. So it was really, really convenient for her. She did remember going by Rob's house and sitting outside his house on at least one occasion. She didn't remember how long she sat there. She said she didn't know what the plan was when she was sitting outside of his house. After she went to the first set of lawyers, they had her create a journal. And let me back up. There was questions about when they actually broke up in January, and they didn't break up because he's an adult and she's a child. That's not possible. But either way, let's just go with it. there was conflicting dates about when they broke up. So their last calls were on January 23rd of 2010. So the prosecutor says, well, let me refresh your memory. You had this journal and you made these journal entries. And per the journal entries, you all broke up January 23rd, 2010. So she ends up reading the journal entries and she starts crying. So per the journal entries, she says that when her and Rob broke up, he called her a silly bitch, slapped her 3 times, spit in her mouth, then slapped her a 4th time. They had oral sex, and yeah. But it came out through cross-examination that she didn't write that journal when the event happened. After she wrote that journal entry, after she went to the civil lawyers who did her first lawsuit, and they told her to make a journal to say what happened. So she didn't make this journal entry when it happened. She made it sometime afterwards. And as far as like the rules of evidence goes, journals are always used and admissible. So that was just a tactic from her first lawyers. She also talked about Robert blowing kisses at her first trial, but admitted that he didn't even know her then. All right, so that was the end of Jherhonda Pace. Also, she's pregnant, and at the beginning of her testimony, she was very, very soft-spoken, but throughout her testimony, her voice was fine. One thing she also talked about was she introduced her friend Dominique to Robert Kelly, and Dominique is, I believe, Dominique Gardner. She stated that she introduced her to R. Kelly. She also had a tattoo of Dominique on her body with their anniversary date because her and Dominique also used to date. The next witness was a cop from the village of Olympia Fields in Illinois. He got a request from another police department to go to R. Kelly's home to check on a missing juvenile who was Dominique Gardner. Long story short, he got to the gate, security was there, they called his manager, they basically said they found out she was 17 the week before and they asked her to leave. They had not seen her. That was the end of that. The next witness was R. Kelly's personal physician. And let me say, this witness was on the stand for entirely too long. Long story short, the gist of it was this. He diagnosed R. Kelly with herpes. R. Kelly got burned one time. He went to R. Kelly's concerts, to his home sometimes. He went to R. Kelly's homes when R. Kelly had a funeral for a dog and a lot of people were there. That was pretty much it. He wasn't a hostile witness. However, on cross-examination, R. Kelly's attorney, I believe her name was Nicole, she did a not wonderful job. He wasn't a hostile witness, so there were only certain questions to ask. But she kept going into all these different strains and types of herpes, which really was not relevant. And she's not a doctor, so she wasn't asking the questions appropriately. So they were not flowing at all. Long story short, he diagnosed R. Kelly with herpes and she was trying to get around that. There were different ways to do it, just from my point of view. She just didn't execute it well. Another thing is that through that testimony, only thing that I really got out of it was R. Kelly never paid his doctor. He paid, but he did give him tickets to his shows. He did go to his home, so on and so forth. So when we got out of trial today, the reporters were coming out and they were talking about the testimony from Nicole, R. Kelly's defense attorney, who cross-examined the doctor. And they were saying she did a horrible job the day before, so they thought she had learned her lesson. But apparently she didn't. Either way, trial starts back tomorrow. There will be a totally fresh new witness on the stand tomorrow. I have no clue who it will be, but tomorrow ends my coverage for this week. I am planning on coming back when R. Kelly's defense team puts on their witnesses. From what I hear from people in the courthouse who know R. Kelly is that Joycelyn Savage, one of the girls who is still with R. Kelly, whose parents are still trying to reach out to her, will testify on his behalf. That will be very very interesting if it does. Other than that, I will put a question and answer in my Instagram story, and you all can ask me all the questions you want because I probably forgot something.